Welcome. We are Hannah, Kivalahula-Uddin. My name is Hannah, Kivalahula-Uddin.
Thank you. And I am Rebecca Lubas, and I am very pleased to welcome you all to our closing Provost Presents Faculty Research for this semester. And never fear, we already have a great program planned for fall of 2025. So we will continue. So I'm really excited about today's talk. Thank you for those of you who came in and for hanging in there with us, because I know it gets very hectic around this time of year. So the provost was unable to attend today, but in his place, introducing our esteemed faculty member is going to be my esteemed colleague, Dean Chinaka Domachuku. And I am going to turn the microphone over to him to do the honors. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It is indeed my honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Kivalahula-Uddin. She's been such a gem since she came to join us at the Watson College of Education, bringing with her many years of experience as a seasoned K-12 administrator, and now working with us to prepare the administrators of the future, but also bringing with her her portfolio as a Native American elder, as well as a researcher whose work continues to have meaningful impact. So she's impacting the school site leaders of tomorrow, helping to shape them through her teaching as well as through her research. And one of the most recent things we did together is she worked with me and helped me develop a curriculum that we are now going to launch this summer. It's a certificate program in Native engagement, which we are going to require of all our project impact men to complete as part of the ethnic studies need. And so Dr. Kivalahula-Uddin worked with a number of other elders. Even Assemblyman Ramos is going to be part of the team that will teach that course. So I'm excited about what we have done so far together, but what her impact has been in the college. So it's my honor to introduce her to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So what I'm going to share with you today is, okay, first I got to tell you the truth. Here's the truth. The email that came to me said, you can do different things with this presentation. You can talk about something that you've already done, or you can talk about something in progress. So I'm going to do both. I'm going to tell you about a chapter that's being published in a book, but I'm also going to talk to you about what I'm working on right now, because what I'm working on right now for me is the most exciting thing in my life. It's why I'm here. It's why I'm standing here. It's why I came to CSUSB. It's why I have a PhD. We're going to get to that, but first we'll talk about the chapter. Okay, let's see. I got to get the little, if I do this right, like this. Is this how do I move it? Yeah, it worked. It worked. Yeah, it worked right here. Let me tell you a little bit about the book the chapter is going to be in. First off, the editor is the person up there on the right. That is, I don't know if you know of her, but her name is Robie Madrigal, and I learned of her probably about 5 or 6 years ago. She was at the University of Washington, but now she went home and she's now living around her tribe, to University of Oklahoma, where she's the department chair of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies. But when I met her, she was at UW, and she emailed me and she asked me, she said, I'd like to have a conversation with you, and would you get in touch with me? And so I spoke to her. What she wanted me to join the faculty there. But I went out and I met with her, and I told her that I appreciated the interest, And it's the reason I think, why she was interested is because the Puyallup tribe, the University of Washington Educational Leadership Program, sits on our ancestral homeland. So it would have been a big coup for her if I would have came back. But I told her in the meeting I appreciated the interest, but my husband didn't have any interest in living in Washington, and that's true. And I am married, so, that was a no. But we have remained friends. So we've been friends ever since, probably about going on 5 or 6 years now. When I came back, I had a conversation, this is on a different slide, with Molly Springer. And I told her about how I met her and about our conversation. She goes, "You know her?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I know her." I said, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, we went to college together. I've known her for over 10 years. I said, "What?" And so anyway, we'll get to the slide. I'll tell you a little bit more about what Molly said about Robin. But the first, I would tell you that she has published many books. She's a lot like Victor Wang, I tell you. She's published a lot of books. But the first edition is this one. And our book is the second edition. It's going to be called Ancestors in Training, Conceptualizing Our Legacy as Indigenous Leaders. All of our chapters have been approved by the editors. They're now with Routledge in the final approval. It's already been approved. Our book has already been approved, but they're in the final editing. That's what they're doing right now. I'm going to go back. And let's see. So what this new book will be about is it's going to offer perspectives from Indigenous leaders in academic affairs, student affairs, and central administration to improve colleges and universities in service to Indigenous students and professionals. I want to tell you how this whole idea came about. I don't know if you know this about me, but I got my PhD from the University of Hawaii. Could you imagine living there for 6 years? It was freaking awesome. Well, anyway, one day I was out on a project tour off the Big Island of Kona, and I had met this person, Dr. Jennifer De Costa. I had met her earlier in 2 classes. I took 2 courses in the doctoral clinical psychology program. The 2 courses that I took, and it's because I thought they would be great for my research, is I took one on cultural community psychology. I took one on community program evaluation. And that's because I've always been super interested in that. That's one of my areas, for my PhD. And so I met her in these classes. And one of the things that we talked about was we would have our conversations is here we're taking a class in clinical psychology on cultural community psychology at the University of Hawaii, at Manoa, yet not one single time, not even once, did the professor ever say anything about the culture of the Native Hawaiian people. And here they're supposed to be training people to be working with the people of Hawaii. Jennifer was just really upset by that. She goes, "How can that be?" And I said, "Jennifer, I don't know." I said, "But let's just be the positive force here and bring it in." So both of us did our research. We gave our presentations at the University of Hawaii, and she did hers specifically on Native Hawaiian, and I did mine on Native American, but we both did them together, and so that was how we met. So we're out on this project tour. She lives on the Big Island. We lived on Oahu. We flew over to go on the tour. So I called her up. I said, "Hey, you want to come? We're going to be on a boat for 6 hours. Sound like fun?" It is about 20% of the time. The rest of the time you're seasick, but they don't tell you that part. I found it out. So anyway, we're on this boat, and we're out there in the middle of the ocean, and she says, "Hannah," I said, "What?" She goes, "We've got to write a book." And I said, "What?" She goes, "Well, we've got to write a book about how to do culturally congruent behavioral therapy. We have to do this because it isn't being taught at the University of Hawaii. So there are no Native Hawaiian professors. None of them know anything about our history." And I'll tell you this, she went 3 years full-time in this program. She finished it. So she took every single class. Right. I had 2, but she took them all. So that was where the idea came. The idea for this chapter came from Jennifer. But and I kept it in my mind as something that someday we will eventually do. So what happened was the call came out from Robin and describing her next book, asking for proposals. And I thought about it, and I thought, "Oh, this is it. This is the match." So I contacted Jennifer. I said, "Let's do it. Let's write that chapter. That'll be our start. That'll be our starting point." She goes, all right, let's do it. So what I'll share with you is that when the chapter comes out, and if you read it, I actually wrote the whole thing. But I wouldn't have done it without Jennifer's help, and she was right there. We met at Zoom. We went over every single sentence. So I just want to tell you that it's really culturally significant and congruent with Native Hawaiian culture. And because Jennifer is Native Hawaiian, graduated from Kamehameha High School, born and raised on the Big Island. I'm a Puyallup tribal member, but I do have Native Hawaiian ancestry. Kivalahula, of course, there's no V in the Hawaiian language, so it's a lot like Hawaii. It would be spelled like that if it were spelled correctly, but it wasn't spelled correctly in the records by the Bureau of Indian Education Affairs back then. Okay, so here we have some words up here in the corner about what Molly said. And then new news about Dr. Minthorn is that she is the president-elect of the Association for the Study of Higher Education, and she will have served that in 2026. And she's already asked me to go to the conference in 2026 in Puerto Rico and present this chapter. I've already agreed. And there is another place coming up that I'll share in a little bit. Okay, let's talk a little bit about ho'oponopono. So what is it? It means to make things right or bring balance to your lives. It is a traditional Hawaiian practice that involves reconciliation, forgiveness, and healing relationships. It refers to a Hawaiian form of conflict resolution and discussion that opens the closed relations between people which have been entangled by hurt feelings and consequent painful retaliations. On the last bullet, I'm going to mention that in a few slides up, I have a little video from Jennifer. She's going to explain to you a little bit more about this. So we'll touch this subject again in about 5 minutes. So originally, ho'oponopono was said to have had both therapeutic and conflict management purposes. It's been referred to as a ritual for mental cleansing, which is considered a first step, and it precedes all medical treatment. So when you go back and read the research about how this was used, a long time ago, it was used by the elders before there'd be any kind of a surgery or anything like that. So this would be the first step they would do before they did any type of medical intervention. And it was done to ensure that all possible grievances would be cleared away to prevent any hostile entanglements that might prevent a successful cure. So this is going back to what I said historically, how it was used a really long time ago before colonization. Native Hawaiians believe that all true health requires harmony of the mind, body, and spirit. Of course, we know that we all believe that as Indigenous people, and that real healing comes from a higher power. It is described as it's used to resolve bad feelings, reinstate positive affective boundaries, and establish the conditions necessary for healing the body, heart, and interpersonal relations. And then it's used in 3 ways with family therapy. And Jennifer uses it this way. She will explain it in her video. It is used by families to discuss and settle arguments, hurt feelings, disturbing thoughts, visions, or dreams. It may also be used with the religious clergy to solve marital, physical, business, or social problems. It has been used in family therapy sessions using Hawaiian tradition-based procedures. One of the most important goals of therapy is to reestablish social and emotional order, which is accomplished by providing an opportunity for participants to have an open discussion. During the discussion, participants will loosen and cut the hihia, which are the negative entanglements. This process clears the air. It allows the participants the opportunity to apologize and seek forgiveness. This therapeutic process will restore goodwill and allow positive exchanges to occur. Ho'oponopono may be facilitated by a behavioral therapist, a social worker, or any family member. It's usually led by the eldest member of the family, the grandparents, or the kapunas. Ho'oponopono sessions vary because different techniques are used, and it must be adjusted to fit the situation. On that last bullet, when you hear Jennifer speak, she's going to talk about this and about how each time she works with the family, it's a little bit different, and she has to make an adjustment. Ho'oponopono has 12 steps that are typically used, and each has a distinct origin or purpose. So the first one You're going to gather the disputants together by a high status family member, community member who knows the parties. You're going to open with prayers to the gods or God, a statement of the problem to be solved or prevented that's growing worse. You're going to talk about what it is. And then there's going to be a questioning of involved participants by the leader. Replies to the leader and the discussion channeled through the leader. There's also going to be periods of silence. And it could be a long time. The silence could last a long time. There's going to be honest confessions to the gods or God, and to each of the disputants. Immediate restitution or arrangements to make restitution as soon as possible. The setting it right of each successive problem that becomes apparent as oponopono proceeds. Mutual forgiveness of the other and releasing him or her from guilt, grudges, and tensions from the wrongdoing. There's a closing prayer and there's a meal or a snack. Recently, it's been used as a mental cleansing process of setting things right through mutual restitution and forgiveness. It consists of repetitions of the following phrases. I love you. Please forgive me. I'm sorry and thank you. Again, I love you. Please forgive me. I'm sorry and thank you. It can be used in other settings such as schools, community mental health facilities, and corporate settings. The general concepts of Ho'oponopono can be transferable with very few changes to its overall content. I'm going to stop here. Let's talk about the first bullet, okay? Because this is also leads to an article that we're working on right now. Jennifer and I, we're writing a piece right now about how you would use it in a K-12 setting. But here's one thing I want to tell you about this. What I'm sharing with you today, I've shared it 2 previous places. I shared it in Palm Springs at the NIA, and I shared it in Minneapolis at the conference we talked about earlier in higher education. What happened in Palm Springs was incredible. So I'm in this room. It's larger than this room. It's pretty full, right? So I give the presentation, and when it's over, this man comes up to me, and he says to me, I'm so glad that you're doing this. You've got to write a book and you've got to get it out there. And I said, thank you, thank you. And he said, no, I mean it. I said, thank you. And then what he told me was really amazing. He told me that he had been the principal of Kamehameha High School, and he had just left that organization like 6 months earlier. And he said that he had worked out there for years as the principal, but he was moving to New Mexico. And he got a job as an assistant professor because he was going there to take care of his elderly parents who weren't doing well. But what he told me that day was, he said, when I was the principal at Kamehameha, I studied about Ho'oponopono. I learned about it. And he said, I thought it was incredible. So what I did was I called faculty meetings, and I met with all of the counselors at Kamehameha schools. And we talked about it. And I asked the counselors, are you using Ho'oponopono with your students? And he said they had a look on their face like, what's that? And he said, have you not heard of it? And they said, no. And he told me that none of them knew what it was. And then he said, where did you go to school? Guess where they went? Every one of them went to UH. And he said to me, so you guys have got to get this done. You have to get it in the book, and it has to get back to Kamehameha. He says, because they need to be using Ho'oponopono with the students. So this is our next mission, is we're working on this article right now, and it was really validating to me to give this presentation and have him come up to me. He added me on LinkedIn, and he wrote me a little note how happy he was to meet me at the conference. So anyway, that was a really cool thing that happened to me, and it made me feel really validated about what we were doing. Okay. So it is a traditional and effective Native Hawaiian behavioral health healing intervention rooted in elder Indigenous knowledge, grounded in the Hawaiian aloha gestures of hospitality, kindness, and respect. It's a very effective conflict resolution strategy. It's non-judging, truth-seeking, and solution-oriented. As Indigenous educational leaders, counselors, therapists, and scholars, we must advocate for universities to offer culturally responsive family counseling techniques that will improve engagement and educational outcomes for all family members. Providing behavioral therapy in a culturally congruent way is an essential step towards reconciliation and decolonization, and it will help our Native Hawaiian students and families strengthen their Indigenous identity. Something I didn't share with you at the beginning is that I have a deep interest in this topic because I didn't share with you either that I have 3 master's degrees before my PhD, but my last master's degree was in guidance counseling, and I love guidance counseling. I did my work at Orting High School in Washington State, and so I have a real interest in school counseling and, of course, in education. So it was a perfect fit for me to work on this with Jennifer. Here is a picture of Jennifer. And so next one I'm going to show you, it's a short video, but I'm going to show you a video that she made. Well, I helped her with it, but we did it on Zoom. But anyway, she explains what she's going to do for you, and she's going to explain to you in a really quick summary what it is, but how she uses it in her practice. So when I met her 9 years ago, she had already been using Ho'oponopono for over 10 years. So she's been using it in her practice now about 20 years on the Big Island. So let me see here.
To dive into the sacred practices. I did take a few Hawaiian studies courses though, but it was just a basic courses. I graduated from University of Hawaii with a bachelor's in psychology and history, and I learned about Ho'oponopono from taking a history class and writing a paper. I learned a lot about Hawaiian history through my history teacher, Dr. Best. So anyway, he's definitely sparked my interest in Ho'oponopono and Native Hawaiian practices. I went to Western Washington University and got my MS in psychology. I did a master's thesis on Hawaiian individuals, and one day I'll tell you about it. But for the purposes of what we're doing, just letting you know that I was able to get a lot of really good information while I was working at Western Washington University, and felt like they were culturally aware. Yeah. University, I went to the University of Oregon and got my master's in education in marriage and family therapy. I went to Oregon State University and got my PhD in human development and family studies. And I've been a therapist since 2002 and practicing in the state of Hawaii since 2006. I learned how to do Ho'oponopono from Auntie Ulu, my beloved Auntie Ulu Garman. She was a cultural advisor at the North Hawaii Community Hospital. We were the last class that she taught before her passing. From Auntie Ulu Garman, we learned in a group format. And we learned from each other in that group format. Just to let you know, it's important to remember that Ho'oponopono is a process. There's a bunch of steps, but it's a process that will unfold, and sometimes you'll move from one step to another, back to the other step. So it's not linear. While the steps are similar across families, the families are all different, and you learn something from every family about yourself, and as well as about them. And working with new families brings new perspectives. Because of my training as a family therapist, I use it primarily with families or couples, but mostly families. It is similar to conflict resolution. It requires participants to oki or cut off grievances. Unfortunately, insurance does not cover the cost of Ho'oponopono in the state of Hawaii, which is kind of surprising, but it does not. It is not recognized as an evidence-based practice. We will work on changing that someday in the future. I typically use family therapy practices until I get to the point of the intervention. So the beginning stages that we were talking about earlier. And then the actual intervention could be family therapy, continue with family therapy, or Ho'oponopono. If we decide on Ho'oponopono, then it becomes pro bono services, so I'm not able to charge for those services. Okay, next slide. The stages of change, we have engagement where the initial stage is focused on building rapport between the therapist and the family or the couple, making sure it's a safe and non-judgmental environment. The individuals will feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Then there's the assessment phase. In this stage, the therapist gathers in-depth information about the family's dynamic communication patterns and specific issues they are facing. This might involve individual interviews, family sessions, and potentially the use of tools like genograms, which is visual representations of family history and relationships. You should look it up. Genograms are quite useful, and you get to gain a lot of knowledge about families with genograms. So I would highly suggest that. So there's the engagement assessment and then the goal setting. And the goal, basically the goal is to decide if you're going to use Ho'oponopono or continue with family therapy. Okay, next. Ho'oponopono, it's time to air grievances together in an open setting. I prefer like at a beach or a park. Somewhere outside though. I'm not sure why. I guess it makes sense that we would do it that way, given Native Hawaiians weren't in their houses doing things all day. They were outside busy doing things. And so my guess is having the open setting is more important than you realize. So anyway, I would probably have it at a beach. Is my preference, my first go-to. It's an opportunity to set things straight. So if something was confusing, you're able to ask questions until it is not confusing. A chance to cut things off. This is the Oki process, to cut off a particular grievance that you might have. Time to forgive, and time to forget. A traditional Ho'oponopono can take days. It depends on the grievance. So I just put together a brief case study for you to ponder. And the names, of course, have been changed of the individuals. But the details are consistent. So basically, Ethel, who's 77, and Kaylee, 53, were not getting along for years. Kaylee felt her mother's drinking got in the way of their relationship. They spent years estranged. Most of the time, Kaylee was very angry and would lash out at her mother. Her therapist suggested family therapy. The family therapist suggested Ho'oponopono. So surprisingly, both were amenable to going. They're also both Native Hawaiians. I didn't put that on the slide, but they're both Native Hawaiians and are familiar, at least heard about the process. So they were open to engaging in it. So we went through the engagement process, the assessment process, and then the goal was to complete Ho'oponopono. And then we did the intervention. And essentially how it went was both shared their perspectives easily. Kaylee was able to express her anger toward her mother repeatedly. At first, her mother was defensive, but later she apologized for what she had done. And keep in mind, this has been a dynamic that has been going on for years. Even though Kaylee was angry, there was something about a sincere apology that captivated her. So she softened after her mother, because her mother had never apologized before up to this point, because she was remaining defensive about her drinking. Her mother did not have plans to give up alcohol, but this practice opened her eyes. The repeated back and forth conversation made her realize that her mother was more important to her than her choices. Her mother saying that she wasn't a good mom growing up somehow set Kaylee free and let go of her anger. So that's where the Oki part happened where she let go of it. Their relationship has been healed through the power of Ho'oponopono and has been ever since, hasn't returned back to what had happened before. And so that's it.
So what we're going to talk about here for just a moment is our future work, what we're working on now. And so the chapter that we put together, it is about this and how it can be used to improve family engagement. But what we're working on next is an article about how to use this in a K-12 school.
Yeah, we stop here because I already talked about the rest of this. So, we'll stop sharing and then we'll go back to the PowerPoint. Yeah, I think we will stop fine, so we'll stop that. Let's see. Okay, so this is the next part. This is where I want to share about the work that I'm working on right now. And for me, it's extremely significant. And I think it's going to be significant when it gets published. The title of my article is Research of Medicine, Healing from Intergenerational Trauma. And right now I'm working on this week submitting my IRB proposal. I was telling Tina Burr the other day, I know you guys have been going through, I mean, I'm there with you when you go through it, but now I'm doing it through the IRB here. So I'm going to do an autoethnography exploring my own lived experiences of being a granddaughter whose grandparents were forced to grow up at Samoa Indian boarding school during the 1920s. So we're talking about 100 years ago. This is my grandmother here. She passed away in 1999. These are my parents on the left. The dates are significant. My father reaches 1 year of his passing, transitioning on April 15th, so 2 weeks ago. And my mother reached her 2 years that she passed in February 2025. The reason why that is significant is because I went to my elders in the Kelp tribe and they told me that I had to wait. I could not publish this. They said, not while your mother's alive. You have to wait until she passes. And then there has to be a settling period for her soul and for you. And then she said, I was told I have to wait 1 to 2 years and for my mother. And she told me I should wait for a year for my father. So the time is now because as I said, the anniversary of my father's passing was 2 weeks ago. I will share a review of the literature that will examine and what occurred during this time period at the boarding school. So this is what I'm talking about, what will be in the article. I've actually already have this part written. I will connect my findings with the review of the literature and analyze my data using the theoretical framework, the lens provided by Dr. Maria Yellowhorse-Brayhart and Dr. Eduardo Duran. They both coined the word intergenerational historical trauma in separate research that was published in the same year. I will say, though, that Dr. Maria Yellowhorse-Brayhart is usually the person, though, he's credited with developing it. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Freeman. But both of them actually published on this the exact same year. Her dissertation was entitled The Return to the Sacred Path, Healing from Historical Trauma and Historical Unresolved Grief Among the Lakota. So here's a little, just a little glimpse here of what my research is going to look at. I'm going to look at the work by Maria Yellowhorse-Brayhart. In her work, she describes the healing as step 1, confronting the historical trauma, 2, understanding the trauma, 3, releasing the pain of the historical trauma, and 4, transcending the trauma. And then on the right, we have Pokalianui, and he is a Hawaiian scholar and sovereignty activist, also an attorney. He has 5 phases in his process of decolonization, which for me were the steps I went through to find my personal healing. So step 1, recovery and discovery and recovery. 2, mourning. 3, dreaming. 4, making a commitment to a decolonized mind. And 5, action. And action is what I'm doing right now. I will share findings derived from the interviews with tribal healers and explain how the information from these interviews can be applied to all of our lives to help each one of us with our own personal healing journey from intergenerational trauma. I will explain the steps for healing from intergenerational historical trauma and decolonization while connecting the information to the broader cultural, social, and political context. So what I would like to start off, or just back up and say to you, when I did my research for my PhD, what I was looking at specifically, I wanted to find out if intergenerational historical trauma affected the attitudes and beliefs of Puyallup tribal members, and did that affect what they thought about education, and does that relate to our academic outcomes, because we have very low academic outcomes for the Puyallup tribe, and for most I would say really American tribes that were all have very low rates for success for adequate yearly progress. And for my tribe, I'm sad to tell you that they have never achieved adequate yearly progress, ever. Oh, geez, so that's why I came to this topic. So I'm going to explain the steps for healing of the trauma. So what happened to me, I'll summarize this, is that when I was doing my research and I really got deep into what happened in the boarding schools at Chamawa, and when I realized what happened to my grandparents, to my grandmother and my grandfather, oh my God, for the first time in my life, I understood why my life was the way it was. I understood why my mother didn't love me. She didn't act like she loved me. She acted like I didn't matter to her. But I could finally understand that it was that trauma of her parents not having role models, not having parents, not having grandparents, not having aunt and uncles, not having a culture, but being raised up at Chamawa Indian boarding schools where they beat them, where they killed them, where they took away their culture. So when I was doing my research for my PhD, it was healing for me. Because why? Because I was in step 1. Apokalinui, recovery and discovery. I understood what happened. And it was when I had that understanding, I could then let go of the pain. I could let go of the feelings I have. So you can see that this work actually connects to the work with Jennifer, because that's on healing and forgiveness as well. Now, yes, you were talking about James Rommel. So here I was at the, and thank you for inviting me. This is from that day. Yes, from that day. So here we're talking. You can see Dr. Finland and myself and James Ramos and Sandy Dixon. And Kim Marcus is in the back. And we were taking a picture of the 4 of us. I didn't know he was back there. And we took it. And I got home. I'm glad he's in there. So what happened was, in a quick story, was Kim was up there at the front doing bird singing with everyone that was up there, and James Ramos too. And so that was on a Friday. I saw that on a Friday. Then on Saturday, I drove in and I parked out here. I was walking in, and as I was walking in, okay, think about this. Think about how many people were at the conference, right? So think about this. I get out of the car and I start walking, and I look over there, and I can see Kim. I didn't know his name then, but I saw him. I said, hi, and he said, hi, and we start talking. He goes, how's it going? And we start, I'm a chatter anyway, so we start talking, and then he says, and then in the talking, he says to me, he says, oh, I'm going for a walk. This is what I have to do to get myself mentally ready for what I have to do. I said, what do you have to do? He says, I'm giving a presentation. Oh, what's your topic? Healing from intergenerational trauma. I said, what? Say that again? Healing from intergenerational trauma. I said, that's me. That's what I'm all about. That's what my research is about. I go, that's me. And he looked at me, he goes, that's what you're into? I go, yeah. And he goes, are you going to come to my session? I go, yeah. I went to both of them that day. But what happened that was so cool was, it was definitely a creator thing. All the people I could have ran into Kim, right? And then he worked for 20 years as a therapist, and he worked with Native Americans in this whole process of healing from trauma. And so I asked him that day when we were walking outside, I said, Kim, has anyone ever interviewed you? Has your story ever been told? Has it ever been published? Has there been a book? Has there been an article? He said, no. I said, can I do it? He said, yes. So this is where it's going to go. So isn't that exciting? It's really exciting. I think it's very exciting. And also he's, as you guys can tell, everyone here, he's extremely knowledgeable of the culture here. So I'm super excited. I'm super excited to go to the conference. That's why I told you that day in the hallway that was so meaningful. That's what it was about. Yeah. Okay. So the outcomes that people, when they read the article, when they come to our future presentations, will be to gain an understanding, the basic concepts of the intergenerational historical trauma, to be able to summarize the review of the literature, to be able to describe why culture is important to human beings, to gain an understanding of decolonization and its importance to healing, to gain an understanding as to why decolonization is the first step that must be done before we bring in new curriculums to our K-12 tribal schools. My work will focus on critically examining colonization, power, domination, inequities, the importance of culture, tribal history, the correction of the historical narratives, the importance of your heritage language, terror management theory, and its applications to culture, and Leonui's decolonization process steps while we envision hope, make a commitment to a decolonized mind, I'm also promoting liberation, self-determination, action, sovereignty, and nation building. Healing from generational trauma is essential for our legacies and our future. Okay, now, let's see, I wanted to end with a power song, but before I do that, well, I guess, okay, that would be the last one. I thought, okay, this wasn't the last one. I had a slide, but it's all right. I didn't get on there. I wanted to tell you that the work that was so inspiring to me in my journey when I started off my dissertation research was really the book. Have you guys read the book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed? You guys know that? You know that book? Yeah. Well, it was his work that Paulo Freire that set me on fire, you know, that got me just excited and into my research. So I was hoping that slide would be here. It's not, but I have it on here. So I brought a printout just in case something like this would happen. Okay, so this was the slide that's not here. But what I want to tell you about his work. So I read his book and I read articles about him when I was working on my dissertation. But here are the words that remained with me. From his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, on page 54, he writes, "The oppressed must be their own example in the struggle for their redemption. It is up to each one of us to be liberators of our own internalized oppression. We are challenged to assume an activist position with a focus on correcting and reclaiming our Indigenous identity. It begins with each one of us." When I read Paulo's work, I'm telling you, it just, oh man, filled me with passion for my dissertation topic. Yeah, so I want to end with that. Okay, now I wanted to see a power song. I have two power songs here. I have one that the kids do from Chief Flusheye. I have one that's more professional, quote unquote, that's done by my tribe. Let's see. Which one do you want to hear? The kids or the professional one? Go to the tribe. All right. Let's go ahead and do this. Oh, yes. Thank you. Questions from anyone? I have to tell you something exciting, though. I have a student from cohort 16, Alma. I'm not sure if she's on here or not, but she reached out to me about a month or so ago and asked me to be her dissertation chair. But what's exciting about this is that we're both doing the same kind of research, and it's on a very similar topic. It's different. It's both about healing. Her journey is different than mine, but we're both on the healing journey, and we're doing this step. We're doing the same methodology. So it's very exciting to have a student that we're actually going to be, doing this together. I said, you and I will be doing it this summer, keeping each other checked every week to make sure we're making progress. But I'm so happy that you came today. I appreciate that. Appreciate your interest and for your support. Thank you so much. Yes.
So your colleague said something about oponopono not being regarded as evidence-based practice. And she said that's a project. So have you guys kind of charted a course as to what that would entail?
Right, and so what we're going to do with our article is that we're going to present the research behind it, and it's really a case of academia not recognizing and accepting our traditional ways and viewing them as valid, and we see that in other areas, other Indigenous people as well. But so as she said in her presentation, that when she does oponopono, she has to do it pro bono because it's not covered by insurance companies. But yes, it will definitely be targeted in the article, absolutely. And she's been, I would say she's very well known on the Big Island because she's a psychologist there, Native Hawaiian, and very few Native Hawaiians have their PhDs, but she has been providing therapy there, as you know by now, almost 20 years. So when I met her, she had been doing it, I think, about 9 years, or about 10 years at the time I met her in class. Yeah. Any other questions?
Hello, my name is Miguel Davalos. I'm a communication studies major here in CSUSB.
Yeah. Hi.
I came with my mom because she has had some pretext on what the Ho'oponopono is.
Okay, excellent.
So when I told her about your presentation, she got so excited that she had to be here.
Oh, great.
She had a question earlier about your parents passing during the intergenerational healing process. She was wondering why you weren't able to speak about them for a year.
Well, okay, and we'll write about this, but one of the things I'll share to you a little bit, like when I spoke to Kim about that, you saw the tribal knowledgeable person here who we know, those of us who are native, is that the way Kim explains it, I like the way he explained it to me when we were out in the parking lot that day, because I told him about how, well, my tribal elders told me that I have to wait 1 to 2 years for my mother because her spirit has to settle in the spirit world, and there's a transitionary period, and I have to settle too, because it's a lot for me to lose my mother, especially when she was abusive to me my whole life. And so our tribal culture director for the Puyallup tribe told me that I had to wait 1 to 2 years. And when I spoke to Kim about it on the parking lot that day, I told him what Peggy told me, and she said, yes, that is true. And I said, tell me more. And he's told me, he said, well, for the first year after a person dies, they're considered traveling. And you can't interrupt that traveling phase. And after 1 year, he said, we do ceremony. He goes, I lead the ceremony, and we move the spirit on. And then I told him, I said, I haven't seen that in the Puyallup tribe that way. And then he talked about it. Then he told me, he says, I'm not supposed to talk about it. And I said, what do you mean? And I said, well, we're supposed to hold these things secret. And I said to him out in the parking lot that day, I said, Kim, if you keep it a secret, how are future generations, how are your grandchildren and their children going to know about these ways if you keep it a secret? I said, we're going to have to talk about it and bring it out. He listened. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no, but he listened. So I'm going to interview him, and we'll see what he's willing to share. But he has told me that that much of this is not supposed to be shared. And I know that when I did my research for my dissertation and I interviewed my elders of my tribe, a lot of them, some of them spoke about it, and some of them told me that in their families they weren't allowed to speak about it, that it was a kept secret what happened at the boarding schools because they didn't want people to know what happened there. So it was that painful. And when I was going to tell you too that my healing came from, I told you, step 1 of Pokaleanui's recovery and discovery. But what happened was I was reading an article called The Healing Path, and Denise wrote about her experiences of her father, and he went to Chamawa Indian boarding school. And there's also a book that I have. I don't know if I brought it, but she also published a book about it. Yeah, I did bring it. This is right here. It's called Stringing Rosaries. This is the book that talks about Chamawa Indian boarding schools and what happened there. And when I read the article on it, oh my God, it's like I told you earlier, I was so overwhelmed by it, what they did to them, the sexual abuse that happened, the physical abuse. They would take belts with nails in them and they would beat them. And they would beat them when they were in bed, and they would beat them until they died. And when I read that, I wept and I wept and I wept for days. And then I realized, oh my God, this is why my mother was the way she was. Then I could finally understand and finally let go and finally feel a personal healing in here. This is what I have to bring out. And I'm going to tell you that when I speak out to some of the elders, I can tell there hasn't been a healing. When I have one sibling, he's 4 years older than me. He has not had a healing. He is very traumatized by what happened. And I've tried to talk to him. I've talked to him many times about it. I've talked to him about the importance of going to therapy. And he'll say to me, I'm not crazy. I'm not going to see a therapist. But I try to talk to him about why he needs to go and how it will help him. But I can just tell you that even in my tribe, there hasn't been any type of a community psychology intervention plan where we bring our elders in and talk about what happened for the healing to occur. And when I was working on my research, I called home one night, and I got my mother on the phone, and I told her on the phone, I said, you'd be amazed by what I'm learning about. I'm learning about what happened at Chamawa and what what grandma and grandpa went through there at the school. And then I told her on the phone, I said, Mom, do you realize that the reason you were abandoned, it wasn't because they didn't love you, it's because they didn't have parenting skills. And there was a silence. And then she wept, and she wept, and she wept. And then she came back and she said, is that really true? I said, yes, that's true. I'm going to tell you, in that phone call, I felt a healing happen with her. It's step one, recover and discover. We have to understand what happened to our family members, to our ancestors. And in my case, it's just my grandparents. And then my mother, who, as I told you, passed 2 years ago, she was taken away from her family at the age of 7. Well, I told you she was abandoned. Her parents were alcoholic. As soon as they got out of Chimawa, they became alcoholics. And then she was raised in white foster care. So she was raised away from her culture. And then she came back to her culture in her adult life. Yeah. Any other questions? And thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it. So, and if you want to reach out, I'll give you Jennifer's. She said anybody that wants to contact Jennifer, Dr. Acosta, she'll talk to you about using Ho'oponopono and how she uses it in her practice. She's very willing to have a conversation with anyone. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming. You have a question, or are you ready?
Yes,
Or?
I mean, it's 2:35 if you want to end this.
Oh, this is,
Sure.
yeah, we're done. And thank you for being here. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for your support and love.